Ethan Walker had lived on the same ranch for almost his entire life. The land stretched far across the countryside, with open fields that seemed to touch the horizon. Every morning, long before the sun appeared, he stepped out onto his porch and breathed in the cool air. It was the kind of silence that only nature could create. Soft, peaceful, and comforting. Ethan liked this quiet life. It gave him space to think, space to work, and space to just be himself. But even though he enjoyed it, there were moments when the silence felt too deep, almost like something was missing. Ethan had inherited the ranch from his father, who had inherited it from his own father. The Walker family had lived on that land for generations. Most people in town knew Ethan well, and they respected him because he never complained, no matter how hard the work got. He fixed fences, trained horses, cared for cattle, and handled every challenge that came with the changing seasons. He was strong and steady, like the land he lived on, but living alone on a ranch wasn't always easy. When storms came, there was no one to help hold the doors. When the days grew long and tiring, there was no one waiting at home to ask how his day went. Sometimes, Ethan sat at his small wooden table, eating dinner quietly while listening to the wind outside. That was when he felt the weight of loneliness the most. Still, Ethan never rushed into anything. He believed life had a way of bringing things at the right time. People in the nearby town admired him for this. They often said he had the patience of an old tree and the heart of someone who had lived through more than his age showed. Every time he went into town to buy supplies, someone would ask him the same question. "Ethan, when are you going to settle down? A man like you shouldn't be alone." Ethan always smiled politely and said, "When the right time comes, I suppose." He didn't refuse the idea, but he didn't chase it either. Despite the friendly teasing, everyone knew Ethan was a sincere man. He didn't play with people's feelings, and he didn't make promises he couldn't keep. That was one reason many families secretly hoped their daughters might catch his attention. But Ethan didn't believe in rushing love. He wanted someone who could understand his life. Someone who didn't mind the quiet. Someone who could appreciate the simple beauty of waking up early and watching the sunrise over the fields. One warm afternoon, Ethan drove into town with a list of things he needed: feed for the animals, tools for repair work, and a few household items. When he entered the small general store, a couple of old friends were already inside chatting. As soon as they saw him, they waved him over. Ethan put down his list and joined them. They talked about the usual things: the weather, the crops, and the noise from the highway construction happening miles away. Then, as always, the conversation slipped toward Ethan's personal life. One of the men laughed and said, "Ethan, rumor has it you might finally be thinking about getting married." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Rumor travels faster than horses around here," he joked. "Well, we're serious," his friend replied. "You're a good man. Hard-working. Honest. Don't you think it's time you found someone to share your life with?" Ethan didn't feel bothered. He understood they were asking out of care, not pressure. So he simply said, "I'm not searching desperately. I'm just open to meeting someone good. If life brings me that person, I'll be grateful." The men nodded, satisfied with his answer, and the conversation moved on. But Ethan didn't realize that nearby, a woman overheard a small piece of what he said. She didn't hear the whole conversation, but she heard enough to repeat it later to someone else. Just like that, a tiny spark of information began to spread. Ethan Walker, the lone rancher, was open to meeting someone sincere. As Ethan drove home later that day, he thought about the conversation again. He wondered if he was really ready. He didn't want someone just because people expected him to get married. He wanted someone who would understand his life. The ranch could be lonely, yes, but it was also beautiful and peaceful. It needed someone who could appreciate both the quiet mornings and the hard work. That evening, he fed the animals, checked the fences, and made sure the water supply was running smoothly. Simple tasks, but each one mattered. When everything was done, he walked to the top of a small hill near his home. From there, he could see the sunset painting the sky with gentle orange and pink shades. He stood quietly, letting the beauty of it settle in his heart. He felt grateful for his life, even with its lonely moments. He wasn't unhappy. He simply felt that maybe, just maybe, life might bring him a companion, someone with a warm smile and a steady heart. But he didn't imagine that his simple words in the store would travel faster than expected. Days passed, and Ethan went back to his usual routine. He worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing anything that needed repair and tending to his animals. Nothing felt different, but something small was already moving in the world outside the ranch. His words had reached more people than he realized. And eventually, they traveled all the way to someone who would change his quiet life forever. A mutual acquaintance, someone who traveled often between cities and towns, heard the story of the rancher looking for a sincere wife. This person happened to meet two identical Chinese twin sisters during a trip and shared the story casually, thinking it was just an interesting piece of local talk. But to the twins, the story sounded surprisingly meaningful. They were already curious about different cultures and lifestyles. They liked exploring new places, meeting new people, and learning new stories. The idea of a quiet, honest rancher living far out in the countryside sparked their interest in a way they didn't expect. They wondered what kind of man lived such a peaceful life. What kind of person could carry such responsibility and still stay gentle at heart? Ethan had no idea that somewhere far away, two strangers were talking about him. He didn't know that his simple, offhand comment about being open to meeting someone had planted a seed in the minds of people he had never met. Life had started moving in a direction he couldn't see yet. On the ranch, Ethan continued his routine. He spent evenings repairing tools in his workshop or sitting on the porch with a cup of warm tea. Sometimes he watched the stars and wondered what the future held. He didn't expect anything extraordinary. He believed life would unfold in its own time. And it would, but in a way he never imagined. For now, he remained the lone rancher, steady, quiet, and patient. He had no idea that the peaceful days he loved were about to change, slowly and gently, because two identical twins far away were preparing for a journey that would eventually lead them right to his doorstep. May and Lan had always been curious about the world beyond their busy city life. Growing up as identical twins, they did almost everything together. They studied together, traveled together when possible, and shared the same dreams of exploring new cultures. They were hardworking, polite, and full of energy, but they also wanted to experience something different from the crowded places they were used to. They wanted to see wide open spaces, calm mornings, and a life that moved at a slower pace. One afternoon, while they were talking with an acquaintance who often traveled to different countries, they heard something that instantly caught their attention. The acquaintance mentioned a story about a rancher in the countryside who lived a peaceful life. He described the man as sincere, hardworking, and respected by everyone in his town. He added, almost as a joke, that this rancher had recently said he was open to meeting someone to share his life with. May raised her eyebrows with interest. A rancher? She asked. Living alone in the countryside? Lan smiled softly. That sounds so different from what we know. The acquaintance nodded. Yes, he lives a very simple life. People say he wakes up with the sunrise and works until the sun goes down. He's the kind of person who doesn't pretend to be anything he's not. The twins listened closely. They both admired people who lived honest and humble lives. Stories of hardworking individuals always inspired them. When the acquaintance added that the rancher had said he was open to meeting someone sincere, May and Lan exchanged a quick glance. They understood each other without saying anything. Both of them felt curious. May leaned forward. What's his name? Ethan Walker, the acquaintance replied. The locals call him the Lone Rancher because he lives far from town, taking care of everything by himself. Lan thought for a moment. She imagined long fields, clean air, and a peaceful environment. It sounds like a different world, she said softly. May nodded. And, interesting. Their acquaintance laughed lightly. If you ever visit that part of the country, you might meet him. People say he's very polite. The conversation continued, but the idea stayed in the twins' minds. Later that evening, when they were alone, May said, I keep thinking about the rancher. Not because of marriage or anything like that, but because his life sounds peaceful. I want to see it, Lan agreed. We grew up around noise and crowds. Maybe it would be nice to experience something completely different, even for a short time. May smiled. Then let's go. Let's visit the countryside. If we meet him, that's fine. If not, we still get to see a new place. Lan didn't need more convincing. She loved adventures, but only when she felt they had meaning. Seeing a different way of living felt meaningful enough. Over the next few days, the twins planned everything. They checked travel options, looked at places to stay, and prepared for a long journey. They didn't tell many people, because they didn't want others to think they were traveling just to meet a man. Their interest was in the experience, not in chasing someone. They respected Ethan, even though they hadn't met him, because the story described him as someone honest and calm. They wanted to see the environment that shaped such a person. When the day of their travel arrived, May and Lan packed their bags with simple clothes, comfortable shoes, and notebooks to record their experiences. They were excited, but also a little nervous. They didn't know what they would find in the countryside, but they were ready for the adventure. The journey took several hours, moving from busy areas into quieter roads. The landscape slowly changed around them. Tall buildings disappeared, replaced by small houses, green fields, and open skies. The farther they traveled, the more they felt a sense of calm growing inside them. Lan looked out the window and whispered, "It's so peaceful." May nodded. "I can't believe people live with so much open space." When they finally arrived near the small town close to Ethan's ranch, the twins felt as if they had stepped into a storybook. The streets were quiet, the people were friendly, and everything moved at a slow pace. They booked a small room at a local inn and spent the first day walking around the town, greeting people and buying small snacks from local shops. The next morning, while they were having breakfast, they heard two men talking at a nearby table. One of them mentioned Ethan's name. May and Lan looked at each other. They didn't mean to eavesdrop, but curiosity pulled their attention. "He's probably out working before sunrise again," one man said with a laugh. "That boy never rests." The other man replied, "And now with all that talk in town about him being open to marriage, people are even more curious." May and Lan shared a surprised look. They didn't know the story had spread through the town this much. After breakfast, the twins stepped outside and walked along the road, leading toward the countryside. They didn't know exactly where the ranch was, but several friendly people in town guided them with smiles and simple directions. As they walked, they talked about what they would say if they actually met the rancher. May joked, "What if he thinks we came here only because of what he said?" Lan shook her head. "We'll be honest. We came to see the countryside and learn about his way of life. That's all." But May still laughed. "Well, if we meet him, let's just tell him the truth. The whole situation is funny when you think about it." Lan smiled. "Yes, it is." After walking for some time, they finally saw a large open field ahead. A wooden fence stretched along the land, and beyond it, they could see a house and a barn. Horses grazed peacefully near the fence, and the soft wind carried the fresh smell of nature. "That must be the ranch," Lan said softly. May nodded. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined." They approached the fence slowly, not wanting to disturb anything. They saw a man working near the barn, lifting equipment with calm strength. He wore simple clothes, a hat to protect himself from the sun, and boots covered with dust from the morning's work. May whispered, "That must be Ethan." Lan nodded, feeling a little nervous now. They didn't want to seem rude or intrusive. They stepped closer, and May called out with a friendly voice, "Excuse me." Ethan looked up, surprised to see two strangers near his fence. He wiped his hands on a cloth and walked toward them politely. "Hello," he said kindly. "Can I help you?" May and Lan exchanged a quick look and then smiled. May spoke first. "We heard about you from someone we know. They told us about your ranch and your life here. We were curious to see it for ourselves." Lan added gently, "We hope we're not disturbing you." Ethan shook his head with a warm smile. Not at all. Visitors don't come by often, so it's a surprise, but a pleasant one. May laughed softly, feeling more relaxed. We came because your story sounded interesting, and we also heard you might be looking for someone sincere. We thought that was very honest. Ethan looked a bit embarrassed but amused too. I didn't know my words traveled so far, May added with a playful tone. We heard you're seeking a wife, and we thought maybe we might be perfect to talk to. She said it lightly, as a friendly icebreaker. And Lan smiled to show they were joking gently, not pressuring him. Ethan chuckled softly. Well, that's certainly the most unexpected introduction I've ever had. The tension disappeared immediately. The twins felt welcomed, and Ethan felt comfortable with their open, friendly nature. He invited them to step inside the ranch area so he could show them around. As the three of them walked across the open land, the twins observed everything with wide eyes: the wooden fences, the soft ground, the quiet animals, and the calm sky. Ethan explained things patiently, telling them about the work he did each day. May asked curious questions, and Lan listened attentively, taking in every detail. Little by little, the beginning of a connection formed not because of the idea of marriage, but because they all respected sincerity, kindness, and the quiet beauty of simple living. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the ranch, spreading soft, golden light across the fields. Ethan was already awake, as usual. He finished feeding the animals and was walking toward the barn when he saw May and Lan approaching from the distance. They looked cheerful, carrying a small bag of snacks they bought from town. Ethan smiled and waved. You're early, May laughed. We wanted to see what ranch life looks like in the morning. Lan added, everything feels so peaceful and different from the places we've lived. Ethan nodded. Mornings are my favorite time of the day. The world is quiet, and the animals are calm. He paused and then said, if you want, you can help me with a few simple tasks. May and Lan agreed happily. They weren't afraid of a little work, and they were excited to learn something new. Ethan showed them how to give food to the horses, how to check the water troughs, and how to guide the animals gently if they needed to move to another part of the field. At first, the twins were a bit unsure. May tried to feed a horse but hesitated when the animal came too close. Ethan laughed softly. Don't worry, he's friendly. Just keep your hand steady. May tried again. And this time, the horse took the food from her hand gently. May's face lit up with joy. Lan, on the other hand, was calm and patient. She watched Ethan carefully, copying his movements with care. When she stroked the horse's neck, the animal relaxed completely, as if it trusted her instantly. Ethan noticed this and said, you have a peaceful way with animals. Lan smiled shyly. I grew up around pets, so maybe that helps. As the morning passed, the three of them fell into a comfortable rhythm. May asked many curious questions about the ranch, the animals, and how Ethan managed everything on his own. Ethan answered with patience, enjoying their interest. Lan listened quietly but asked thoughtful questions that showed how deeply she observed things. When they took a break under a tree, May handed Ethan a snack from their bag. We brought something for you, she said. Ethan thanked her and sat down with them. They talked about their childhood, their culture, and what brought them to the countryside. May told him about their busy city life, where the streets were always crowded and days passed quickly. We wanted to experience something different, she said. Something calmer. Lan added, we wanted to see how people live when life is simple and peaceful. Your story made us curious. Ethan listened quietly, impressed by how genuinely they spoke. He had never met anyone who traveled so far just to understand a lifestyle. Their interest didn't feel shallow. It felt sincere. For the next few days, the twins returned to the ranch regularly. Sometimes they came early in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. Ethan welcomed them kindly each time. Having them around changed the rhythm of the ranch. There was laughter, conversation, and a sense of companionship that Ethan hadn't felt in a long time. May was full of energy. She tried everything, feeding chickens, brushing horses, and even helping Ethan stack hay. She often made jokes, and Ethan found her cheerful nature refreshing. She brought life to the quiet spaces of the ranch. Lan was gentle and observant. She noticed small things, like how Ethan carefully adjusted a saddle, or how the wind carried the sound of the animals. She asked questions that made Ethan think more deeply about his work and his life. Her calm presence brought a sense of harmony that softened the quietness around the ranch. One afternoon, as Ethan fixed a section of the fence, May stood beside him handing him tools. She talked about how interesting it was to see how everything on the ranch connected. "Nothing here is useless," she said. "Every small thing has a purpose." Ethan nodded. "That's true. Nature teaches us that everything matters, even the smallest tasks." While they worked, Lan walked along the fence, taking pictures of the landscape. She loved capturing simple things: the sunlight on the grass, a bird sitting on the fence, the long shadows stretching across the ground. When May teased her about taking too many pictures, Lan simply smiled and said, "I want to remember this place." That evening, Ethan invited them to sit by the small fire pit behind his house. The sky was turning pink and purple as the sun set. They sat quietly for a moment, watching the colors change. May broke the silence with a teasing smile. "Ethan, did you ever imagine two strangers would show up at your ranch and start helping you every day?" Ethan laughed softly. "I never imagined anything like that. But life is full of surprises." Lan looked at him kindly. "Do you like having company after so long?" Ethan thought for a moment, and then nodded. "I do. It's nice to have conversations, to hear different ideas. It reminds me that the world is bigger than just this ranch." May tapped her sister's shoulder playfully. "See? We were right to come." Lan smiled. Maybe. Over the next week, the three of them grew even closer. They shared stories, laughter, and small moments that felt meaningful. Ethan learned that May was brave and adventurous, always ready to try something new. He learned that Lan was thoughtful and kind, someone who brought calmness wherever she went. They learned things about Ethan too: how hard-working he was, how honest, how patient. They saw that he wasn't just a rancher, but a man who cared deeply about his land, his animals, and living truthfully. One day, the twins stayed late to help Ethan move some equipment into the barn before a storm arrived. The wind grew stronger, and the sky darkened quickly. May struggled to hold onto a light crate as the wind pushed against her. Ethan rushed to help her, steadying the crate so she could set it down safely. She laughed breathlessly. "This ranch is more exciting than it looks." Lan held her hair back as the wind blew. "We should hurry," she said. "The storm is getting stronger." Together, the three of them finished the work just as the first drops of rain began to fall. They ran inside the barn, laughing as the rain came pouring down. Inside, the warm, earthy smell of hay surrounded them. The animals were sheltered, the equipment was safe, and the sound of heavy rain on the roof created a cozy feeling. They sat on a wooden bench, catching their breath. May looked up at the ceiling and said, "I've never felt a storm like this." "It sounds powerful," Ethan nodded. "Storms out here come fast. But once you know the land well, you learn to prepare for them." Lan watched the rain thoughtfully. "I like how you take care of everything," she said softly. "Your work is hard, but you do it with so much patience." Ethan smiled at her. "Thank you." The storm lasted for almost an hour, but inside the barn, time felt slow and peaceful. When the rain finally softened, the three of them stepped outside. The air smelled fresh, and everything looked clean. As they walked back toward the house, May slowed down and said, "Ethan, we really enjoy being here. We've learned so much about your life," Lan added. "And we're grateful for how kind you've been." Ethan looked at them with gentle sincerity. "I'm grateful for your company. You've brought a lot of light into this quiet place." That night, after the twins left for their inn in town, Ethan sat on his porch thinking about everything that had happened in the past days. He had grown used to their presence: May's laughter, Lan's calm voice, their questions, their help, their respect for his life. It felt natural now, almost like they belonged in the rhythm of the ranch. But he also felt a quiet uncertainty. He knew that someday they would have to leave. Their visit wasn't permanent. and he wondered what he would feel when that day arrived. What he didn't realize was that the twins were thinking something similar. They had grown attached to the ranch, to the peace it offered, and to the man who welcomed them with kindness. They felt something special forming, but they weren't sure what the future would bring. All three of them were learning that the strongest connections often begin quietly, through shared moments, respect, and understanding. The next few days passed quietly, but something had changed. Ethan noticed that when he woke up in the morning, he wondered whether May and Lon would visit. When he worked in the fields, he sometimes found himself smiling at the memory of May's jokes or Lon's calm voice. He had lived alone for so long that he wasn't used to having people around, yet he realized he liked their presence more than he expected. May and Lon felt the same. Every morning, they woke up at the inn and talked about what they might learn that day on the ranch. They enjoyed helping Ethan, but it wasn't just the ranch work that drew them back. It was the kindness in his voice, the honesty in his eyes, and the peaceful atmosphere around him. Being with him made them feel grounded, as if the world had slowed down just enough for them to breathe deeply. One morning, the twins arrived with a small homemade lunch. May waved the basket in the air and said, "We thought you might like something different today." Ethan laughed warmly. "I'm sure it's better than what I usually cook." They sat under the shade of a tree and shared simple food, bread, fruit, and tea. The air was warm, and the sky was bright blue. For a moment, everything felt perfect. While they ate, May said, "Ethan, we've been thinking a lot these days. Being here feels special." Lon nodded. "It feels peaceful and meaningful." Ethan listened quietly. He sensed that they were leading to something important. May continued in a gentle voice, "We didn't come here only because of what we heard about you. At first, it was curiosity. But now," she looked at her sister for support. Lan finished the sentence softly. "Now we feel connected to this place. And to you." To you. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. He had never expected someone to say something like that to him. For years, he believed his quiet life might never attract anyone's interest. Yet here were two kind sisters who had traveled from far away and had come to care about him and the life he lived. He took a moment before speaking. "I feel the same," he said honestly. "Your presence has brought joy to this ranch. I didn't realize how lonely I had grown until you two brought laughter and light into my days." May grinned widely. "See, Lan? I told you he liked us." Lan rolled her eyes playfully but smiled. "I knew that too. I just didn't say it." They laughed together, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. As days passed, their bond deepened naturally. Ethan taught them new skills, from guiding horses to repairing fences. May became better at handling the animals, though she still made mistakes that led to shared laughter. Lan continued taking pictures, capturing each moment with gentle care. Sometimes the three of them sat on the porch after a long day, watching the stars. May talked about their dreams of exploring the world. Lon shared stories from their childhood, stories filled with warmth and unity. Ethan listened, feeling lucky to be part of their world, even if it was just for a moment. One afternoon, Ethan took them to the top of a small hill on the ranch, the same hill where he often watched the sunset alone. The climb wasn't far, but the view was beautiful. The land below stretched endlessly, glowing under the lowering sun. May gasped softly. "It's breathtaking," Lan whispered. "I've never seen a sky look so big." Ethan smiled. "Whenever I felt lost or unsure, I came here. The view always reminded me that life has more beauty than we notice." They stood together, feeling the soft wind on their faces. May turned to Ethan and said, "No wonder you love this place so much." Lan added, "It feels like the world is speaking softly here." Ethan looked at them with gentle eyes. "I'm glad I could share this with you." For a while, none of them spoke. They only watched the sun dip lower. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt warm, meaningful, and comforting. That night, after returning from the hill, they sat outside Ethan's house again. May looked thoughtful. "Ethan, Do you ever think about the future? He nodded slowly. I do. But I never imagined it clearly. I only knew I wanted a life filled with honesty and peace, Lan asked quietly. And what about having someone to share it with? Ethan hesitated for a moment. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wanted to choose the right words. I always hoped I'd meet someone who understood my life, he said softly. Someone who didn't feel bothered by the quiet. Someone whose heart matched the rhythm of this land. Riesig, May smiled with understanding. And now? Ethan met their eyes sincerely. Now I wonder if I've already met those people. The twins felt their hearts warm at his words. May placed her hand over her chest playfully. If you keep talking like that, Ethan, we might never leave. Lan laughed quietly. Maybe we don't want to leave. The warmth of their bond grew stronger, but the reality of time slowly approached. Their planned visit was growing longer than expected. They had families back home, responsibilities, and lives that were waiting for them. One evening, after a long and happy day on the ranch, May sighed softly. Ethan, she began, our trip is supposed to end soon. Ethan felt a quiet ache inside him. He had been avoiding the thought, hoping the days would stretch longer. Lan continued gently, we don't want to leave, but we also don't want to disappear without telling you. Ethan looked at them with calm honesty. I knew this day would come, but hearing it still hurts. May reached out and touched his arm lightly. We don't want to end anything here. We just don't know what comes next. Lan nodded. But we do know one thing. You are important to us. Ethan breathed slowly, grounding himself. You two are important to me too. They talked for a long time, sharing their worries, their hopes, and their wishes. They didn't rush to make decisions. They simply trusted the honesty they had built together. Before they finally left the ranch that evening, Ethan made a simple request. Can we meet tomorrow? I want to tell you something. May and Lan agreed. The next morning, they returned to the ranch early. The sun had barely risen. Ethan stood near the fence, waiting for them with a hopeful, yet nervous expression. When they reached him, he spoke gently. I know your life is far away from here. I know you have responsibilities. But I also know what I feel. These days with you have been some of the happiest I've had in years. How? The twins listened carefully. Ethan continued, I don't want to stop seeing you. I don't want this connection to end. If you're willing, I'd like to visit you. Stay in touch. And see where our bond leads slowly. Honestly. Without pressure. May felt tears gather in her eyes, but they were happy tears. Ethan, we feel the same. We don't want to end this either. Lan nodded, her voice soft but certain. We want to keep this connection too. No rush. No forced commitments. Just sincerity. Ethan smiled a warm, relieved smile. The twins stepped closer, and May said teasingly, So we don't need to say we're perfect for you anymore? Ethan laughed. Maybe you were perfect for me from the start. The three of them shared a gentle moment, filled with trust and warmth, before leaving the countryside. May and Lan visited the hill one last time. Ethan joined them. They stood together, watching the sunrise, this time a new beginning instead of an ending. They promised to stay connected, to visit again, and to let their bond grow naturally. When the twins finally left the town, Ethan watched their car disappear down the long road. He didn't feel the deep loneliness he once felt. Instead, he felt hope, something warm and calm, like the sunrise over the fields. And in their hearts, May and Lan carried the same hope. They knew this chapter of their lives wasn't closing. It was only beginning. Shaped by sincerity, respect, and a connection none of them had expected, but all of them treasured.